There are moments in life when the ground simply vanishes beneath your feet. You do not fall immediately. You hover in a state of suspended animation, staring at a reality that no longer makes sense. For Chloe, this moment did not happen in a hospital room or during a midnight phone call. It happened under the glaring, unforgiving fluorescent lights of a high-end Chicago shopping mall. She was supposed to be looking for a dress for her 30th birthday party. A party she dreaded. A party her husband demanded. Instead, she found herself staring at the man she had promised to love forever, as his hands traced the waist of a woman she had never seen before. And they were not looking at evening gowns. They were looking at wedding dresses. This is the story of how a single afternoon shattered a decade of lies, and how a woman pushed to the absolute edge finally learned how to fight back. Chloe had spent the last 7 years slowly shrinking to fit into the box her husband, Richard, had built for her. She had inherited a lucrative real estate holding company and a historic Gold Coast mansion after her parents passed away. Richard, a slick corporate climber, had seamlessly taken over the management of her assets, convincing her that a mother's place was at home. He criticized her bohemian style, her laughter, and her parenting. He treated her like a naive child who needed constant supervision. But the darkest shadow in their marriage was his treatment of their 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily was born with a congenital condition that left one leg shorter than the other. She walked with a pronounced limp. To Richard, a man obsessed with appearances and perfection, his daughter was a flawed accessory. He withdrew entirely, leaving Chloe to shield the little girl from his cold, resentful glares. Chloe had convinced herself that this was just a rough patch. She believed that if she just tried harder, dressed better, and smiled more, the man she fell in love with would return. The magnificent mile of Chicago was alive with the frantic energy of weekend shoppers. The wind whipping off Lake Michigan was bitterly cold, but inside the sprawling luxury mall, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and roasted coffee. Chloe wandered aimlessly past the gleaming storefronts. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who looked exhausted. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore her favorite oversized cashmere sweater. Richard had specifically ordered her to buy a designer cocktail dress. He had sneered at her over morning coffee, telling her she dressed like a depressed teenager. He reminded her that his business partners would be at the house tomorrow night. He needed her to look the part of the wealthy socialite. The pressure sat on her chest like a physical weight. She hated these parties. She hated the fake smiles, the shallow conversations, and the way Richard would parade her around like a prized showdog before ignoring her for the rest of the night. She just wanted a quiet evening with a cake and her daughter. But Richard controlled everything now. As she paused outside a boutique displaying sparkling evening wear, Chloe hugged her arms around her chest. The memory of Richard's voice echoed in her mind, sharp and stinging. He had told her that he was embarrassed by her. He said she lacked the sophistication required for his circle. The constant drip of his criticism had hollowed her out over the years. She constantly questioned her own sanity and worth. Was she really that difficult to love? Was it her fault that their marriage felt like a freezing, empty room? She forced herself to walk into the store, her fingers grazing the cool silk of a black dress on the rack. She felt entirely out of place. The sales associates, impeccably dressed and perfectly made up, seemed to look right through her. Chloe sighed heavily, wishing she could just disappear. She pulled out her phone to check the time. calculating how quickly she could make a purchase and escape back to the safety of her daughter's bedroom. But before she could turn to the register, a familiar voice cut through the ambient instrumental music playing in the mall. It was a low, smooth baritone. A voice she had heard whispering in the dark, arguing over finances and giving sharp commands to valet drivers. It was Richard. Chloe froze completely. Her heart gave a sudden, painful lurch. Had he come to surprise her? Had he felt guilty about his harsh words this morning and decided to help her pick out a dress? A desperate, pathetic wave of hope washed over her. Maybe he really did care. She turned around slowly, a tentative smile forming on her lips, ready to greet him. But the smile died before it even reached her eyes. Richard was standing near a marble fountain about 50 feet away, and he was not alone. Clinging to his arm was a woman who looked like she had stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. She had voluminous blonde hair, a perfectly tailored white blazer that accentuated her curves, and legs that went on forever. Chloe stopped breathing. She stared, unblinking, her brain refusing to process the image. The woman was laughing, her head thrown back, and Richard was looking at her with a level of pure adoration Chloe had not seen in years. Chloe stood completely paralyzed behind a large potted palm tree. She watched as Richard reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind the blonde woman's ear. The gesture was so deeply intimate, so casual, that it hit Chloe like a physical blow to the stomach. His hand lingered on her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline. This was not a colleague. This was not an assistant. The realization cascaded over Chloe, bringing with it a wave of nausea. He was having an affair. The late nights at the office, the sudden business trips, the password changes on his phone. All the red flags she had willfully ignored were now waving furiously in her face. The woman leaned in and kissed his neck, right there in the middle of the crowded mall. Richard chuckled, wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her flush against him. Chloe wanted to scream. She wanted to run forward and slap them both, but her legs felt like lead. She was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up, forced to watch the destruction of her life in high definition. Suddenly, the woman pointed excitedly toward a massive glass storefront slightly down the concourse. Chloe's eyes followed her manicured finger, and a fresh wave of horror washed over her. It was a bridal boutique. The windows were filled with cascading white tulle, pearls, and delicate lace. Richard smiled broadly, nodded, and guided the woman toward the entrance. A bridal boutique. The words repeated in Chloe's mind, echoing with a deafening volume. What was happening? Richard was a married man. He was her husband. Why in the world would he be taking his mistress to look at wedding dresses? A dark, terrifying curiosity seized Chloe. The shock morphed into a desperate need to know the truth. Moving purely on instinct, she stepped out from behind the palm tree and began to follow them. She kept her distance, blending in with a group of tourists, her eyes locked on Richard's broad shoulders. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to shove them into the pockets of her jeans. She reached the entrance of the boutique just as the glass doors swung shut behind them. Chloe slipped inside the bridal shop, the soft chime of the door masked by the chatter of a nearby bridal party. The interior was awash in soft pink lighting and plush velvet carpets. She quickly grabbed a random ivory gown off the nearest rack, holding it up like a shield, and darted behind a row of heavy bridesmaid dresses. From her hidden vantage point, she had a clear view of the VIP viewing area. Richard and the blonde were sitting on a curved velvet sofa. A bubbly saleswoman was pouring them champagne. Richard raised his glass, clinking it against the woman's. He looked so relaxed, so happy. The saleswoman clasped her hands together and asked when the happy couple was planning the big day. Chloe held her breath, the fabric of the ivory gown clutched tightly in her fists. The blonde woman pouted prettily, looking up at Richard with wide eyes. She complained that they had been waiting far too long. Richard leaned in, his voice carrying clearly over the quiet hum of the boutique. He promised her that it would not be much longer, just a few more weeks. Chloe pressed her back against the cool mirrored wall of the boutique, her knees trembling violently. She closed her eyes, praying she was having a hallucination. But the blonde woman's high-pitched voice pierced the air again. She whined, asking Richard when he was finally going to get rid of his miserable wife. The word miserable hit Chloe hard. Richard chuckled, taking a sip of his champagne. He told the blonde to be patient. He explained his entire sinister plan with terrifying calmness. He said Chloe was fragile and weak. He had slowly convinced her she was incompetent. Tomorrow, after the birthday party, he was going to present her with the final paperwork. He needed her to sign over the controlling shares of the real estate company and the deed to the Gold Coast house to an LLC he controlled. He called it a tax strategy. He laughed as he said she was gullible enough to sign anything he put in front of her. Once the ink was dry, he would file for divorce and leave her with absolutely nothing. The blonde woman giggled, tracing the rim of her champagne flute. "But what if she refuses to sign?" she asked, sounding almost hopeful for drama. Richard's voice turned cold and hard, a tone Chloe recognized from his worst rages. He stated confidently that Chloe would not refuse. If she tried to put up a fight, he had leverage. He would use her mental state against her. He would claim she was unstable, an unfit mother. He threatened to take custody of their disabled daughter, Lily. He admitted he did not even want the crippled kid, his exact horrific words. But he knew that taking Lily away would destroy Chloe completely. She would give him every penny she had just to keep the child. Chloe slapped her hand over her mouth to muffle a violent sob. The cruelty was beyond anything she could have imagined. He was not just cheating on her. He was planning to steal her family's legacy and use her beloved, innocent daughter as a pawn in a sick game of extortion. He was a monster, wearing the skin of her husband. The saleswoman returned with 3 elaborate gowns, and the blonde squealed in delight, disappearing into a massive fitting room. Richard sat alone on the velvet sofa, checking his phone, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife was standing 20 feet away, listening to her life burn down. Chloe knew she had to get out of there before she collapsed. She turned blindly, dropping the ivory gown on a nearby chair, and stumbled toward the exit. The air outside the boutique hit her face, but she could not breathe. The walls of the mall felt like they were closing in on her. Her vision blurred with thick, hot tears. She practically ran toward the sliding glass doors leading to the parking garage. The cold Chicago wind ripped through her sweater, shocking her system. She reached her SUV, unlocked it with a shaking hand, and threw herself into the driver's seat. She locked the doors, gripped the leather steering wheel, and let out a raw, agonizing scream. It was a sound of pure grief, betrayal, and absolute terror. Everything she knew was a lie. She sat in the freezing car for 20 minutes, her chest heaving as she tried to pull herself together. She could not fall apart. Not yet. If she confronted him now, without a plan, he would execute his threats. He would take Lily. The thought of Richard's cold hands anywhere near her sweet daughter filled Chloe with a sudden, searing rage. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a fierce, maternal adrenaline. She wiped her ruined makeup off with a tissue, took 3 deep, shuddering breaths, and started the engine. She had to pick Lily up from her private preschool in Lincoln Park. She had to act completely normal. As she navigated the dense city traffic, Chloe's mind raced. Richard thought she was weak. He thought she was broken. He had underestimated the one thing that kept her tethered to this earth: her love for her child. She would not let him take her company. She would not let him take her house. And she would rather die than let him use Lily as leverage. She needed a plan. She needed an escape route. The elite Lincoln Park preschool looked like a miniature Ivy League campus with its red brick walls and wrought iron gates. Chloe parked her SUV, pasted a calm, pleasant smile onto her face, and walked toward the entrance. She felt like a completely different person than the woman who had walked into the mall 2 hours ago. The innocent wife was dead. Inside the warm, brightly lit building, the sounds of children laughing echoed in the halls. Chloe walked to Lily's classroom. The teacher smiled warmly and pointed toward the playground. Chloe stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. She spotted Lily immediately. Her daughter was standing near the edge of the sandbox, her small shoulders slumped. As Chloe approached, she saw the tears streaking Lily's flushed cheeks. Lily was favoring her shorter leg, her special orthopedic shoe covered in sand. A boy slightly taller than Lily was standing nearby, pointing at her and laughing with another child. He was mimicking the way she walked. The sight made Chloe's blood boil. Her heart shattered all over again, this time for the pain her daughter had to endure. Chloe rushed forward, falling to her knees and wrapping her arms around her trembling daughter. Lily buried her face in Chloe's neck, crying softly. She sobbed that the boy, Mason, had called her a broken robot because of her leg. Chloe kissed the top of her head, whispering fierce, soothing words. She told Lily that she was beautiful, that she was perfect exactly the way she was. As she comforted her child, a tall shadow fell over them. Chloe looked up, her eyes blazing with protective fury. A man was standing there, holding the offending boy by the hand. The man was striking. He had dark, messy hair, kind hazel eyes, and was dressed in a sharp charcoal business suit. He did not look angry. He looked deeply mortified. He looked down at Chloe and Lily with genuine sorrow. He introduced himself as Ethan, Mason's father. He said he had seen what happened from the gate and pulled his son aside immediately. He forced the boy to step forward. Mason, looking terrified of his father's stern tone, mumbled a quiet, stuttering apology to Lily, promising never to mock her again. Lily peeked out from Chloe's embrace, her large blue eyes assessing the boy. With a dignity that always astounded Chloe, the little girl wiped her nose and nodded slowly. She accepted the apology, but warned him that robots were actually very strong. The adults shared a brief, tension-breaking moment. Ethan let out a sigh of relief, running a hand through his hair. He looked directly at Chloe, his gaze lingering. He confessed that he was a single dad, trying to navigate raising a boy on his own, and sometimes he failed miserably at teaching empathy. His honesty was disarming. Chloe stood up, brushing the sand off her jeans. she found herself softening. She told him it was fine, that kids can be cruel, but parents who correct them are rare. Ethan smiled, a warm, genuine expression that reached his eyes. He noticed her red-rimmed eyes and the slight tremor in her hands. Without crossing a line, he softly asked if she was okay. He mentioned there was a fantastic artisan gelato shop just 2 blocks away. He offered to buy them ice cream as a peace offering. Normally, Chloe would have politely declined and hurried home to hide in her gilded cage. But the thought of returning to that massive, empty house to wait for Richard made her skin crawl. She looked at Lily, who was suddenly very interested in the word gelato. Against all her usual instincts, Chloe agreed. They walked together down the tree-lined street, the autumn leaves crunching under their boots. Ethan walked beside her, his presence surprisingly calming. At the brightly lit gelato shop, the children sat at a small red table, bonding over massive cups of strawberry and chocolate. Chloe and Ethan sat at the adjacent table. He ordered pistachio, exactly the same flavor Chloe had chosen. They laughed at the coincidence. As the conversation flowed, Chloe learned that Ethan was a partner at a prominent family law firm downtown. He specialized in high-stakes divorces. The universe, it seemed, had a very dark sense of humor. A divorce lawyer. Right here, right now. Chloe stared at her melting gelato, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. Ethan proved to be a keen observer. He noticed her sudden silence and the way she gripped her spoon until her knuckles turned white. He gently asked about Lily's condition. Chloe, feeling a strange urge to unburden herself to this kind stranger, explained the congenital defect. She talked about the pain of seeing her child struggle and the lack of support from her husband. Ethan listened intently, never interrupting. When she finished, he leaned forward. He told her about his college roommate, Dr. Harrison. The man was now a pioneering pediatric orthopedic surgeon based in Miami. He had developed a groundbreaking, minimally invasive procedure for leg lengthening in young children, reducing recovery time by months. Ethan said Dr. Harrison's wait list was 2 years long, but he owed Ethan a massive favor. He offered to make a call to get Lily in for a consultation immediately. Chloe felt a sudden, overwhelming rush of hope. Miami. Far away from Richard, far away from the impending disaster. But before she could respond, her cell phone began to vibrate violently on the metal table. The screen flashed Richard's name. The sight of it felt like a venomous snake resting on the table. Chloe's breathing hitched. Ethan noticed the absolute terror in her eyes. He watched as the color drained completely from her face. She hesitated for a long moment before finally swiping to answer. Richard's voice barked through the speaker, loud enough for Ethan to hear the abrasive tone. He demanded to know where she was. He reminded her about the caterers arriving for the birthday party setup and scolded her for wasting time. Chloe forced her voice to remain steady, completely hiding the rage boiling beneath her skin. She lied smoothly, saying they were just picking up some last-minute decorations and would be home soon. Richard snapped a final command and hung up without saying goodbye. Chloe slowly lowered the phone, her hands trembling again. She looked up at Ethan. His hazel eyes were dark with understanding. He reached across the table, gently placing a business card near her hand. He told her that whatever was happening in her life, she did not have to face it alone. He told her to call him any time, day or night. The drive back to the Gold Coast mansion felt like a death march. Chloe gripped the steering wheel, her mind assembling the pieces of her escape. She needed money. She needed her passports. She needed time. When they walked through the heavy oak doors of the house, the foyer was already swarming with florists and caterers. It was absolute chaos. Richard emerged from his home office looking annoyed. He barely glanced at Lily, who instinctively shrank behind her mother's legs. He ordered Chloe to go upstairs and get ready. He warned her not to embarrass him tonight. Chloe looked at the man she had slept beside for 7 years. She saw the absolute emptiness in his soul. She nodded blankly, playing the part of the obedient, subdued wife. She took Lily upstairs, settled her in the nursery with a movie and her nanny, and walked into the master bedroom. She put on the simple black dress she had bought weeks ago, applying bright red lipstick. It felt like war paint. Tonight, she had to perform the role of a lifetime. She had to smile while standing next to her executioner. The party was a suffocating display of wealth and pretense. The living room was filled with jazz music, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the low hum of corporate networking. Chloe circulated through the room, accepting hollow birthday wishes from people who did not know her middle name. She felt entirely detached, floating above her own body. She kept glancing at Richard, who was in his element, laughing loudly and shaking hands. He played the loving husband perfectly when someone was watching, resting a hand on the small of her back. The touch made her want to vomit. She knew what he was planning for tomorrow. The documents were probably already sitting on his mahogany desk. She excused herself, retreating to a quiet corner near the grand staircase. She desperately wanted to run up to the nursery and hold Lily. But then, the heavy front door opened, letting in a gust of cold air. Chloe's blood ran cold. Walking into her home, wearing a stunning emerald green gown, was the blonde woman from the bridal boutique, Tiffany. Tiffany handed her coat to a server and confidently scanned the room, her eyes locking onto Richard. Richard's face momentarily paled, clearly panicked that his mistress had shown up uninvited. He quickly composed himself and intercepted her. Chloe watched from the shadows, her nails digging into her palms. The sheer audacity. To bring the woman he was planning to marry into her home on her birthday. It was the ultimate disrespect. Chloe felt a dangerous calmness settle over her. The frightened wife was entirely gone. She walked slowly across the room, navigating the crowd until she stood directly in front of them. Richard stiffened. He quickly introduced Tiffany as a new marketing consultant for the firm. Tiffany smiled, a predatory, mocking smirk. She wished Chloe a happy birthday, adding a passive-aggressive comment about how exhausting it must be to reach 30. Chloe did not flinch. She smiled back, her eyes completely dead. She thanked her smoothly, remarking that it was always fascinating to meet the temporary staff. Tiffany's smile cracked, her eyes flashing with sudden venom. Richard quickly grabbed Chloe's elbow, his grip tight enough to bruise. He pulled her a few steps away, his voice a low, furious hiss. He demanded to know what was wrong with her. He told her to stop acting crazy and be a gracious host. Chloe looked down at his hand on her arm and then up into his angry eyes. She leaned in close so only he could hear. She whispered that she knew about the bridal shop. She knew about the wedding dress. She knew everything. Richard recoiled as if he had been struck by lightning. The colour drained from his face. For a fraction of a second, he looked terrified. But Richard was a cornered animal, and cornered animals attack. His shock quickly morphed into absolute malice. He realized the game was up. He did not deny it. He did not apologize. Instead, a cruel, calculating smile spread across his face. He stepped back and clapped his hands loudly, commanding the attention of the entire room. The jazz music faded. The chatter stopped. Everyone turned to look at the host. Richard announced to the crowd of wealthy socialites that it was time for a special birthday surprise. He projected his voice, dripping with fake enthusiasm. He proclaimed that his lovely wife had been working so hard, and to honor her, their daughter Lily had prepared a special dance routine. The crowd clapped politely. Chloe's heart stopped. No, he wouldn't. Lily hated dancing in public. Her limp made her intensely self-conscious, and Richard knew this. He despised her condition. This was punishment. He was using the child to humiliate Chloe, to break her spirit publicly before dropping the legal hammer tomorrow. He gestured toward the top of the stairs where the nanny, looking thoroughly confused, was holding Lily's hand. The little girl looked terrified, staring down at the sea of strange faces. Richard called out to her, telling her to come down and show everyone her little routine. Chloe moved faster than she ever had in her life. She shoved past Richard, physically blocking the staircase. She screamed at him to stop, her voice echoing wildly through the sudden dead silence of the room. Richard lunged forward, grabbing Chloe by the shoulders, trying to force her out of the way. She fought back, her hands slamming against his chest. She yelled that he was a monster, that he would never touch her daughter. The guests gasped in horror. Whispers erupted across the room. Richard suddenly let go of her, throwing his hands up in a gesture of surrender, playing the victim perfectly. He looked at the crowd with an expression of deep, manufactured sorrow. He apologized loudly to the guests. He declared that his wife had been drinking heavily again. He spun a tragic lie on the spot, claiming she suffered from severe psychiatric issues and alcoholism, and that her paranoia was tearing their family apart. Several guests, including Tiffany, subtly pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Chloe stood on the stairs, her hair disheveled, her chest heaving, screaming that he was a liar. She realized instantly what he was doing. He was creating the evidence he needed to take Lily away. He was building his custody case right there in the foyer. Realizing she was playing right into his trap, Chloe stopped fighting. She spun around and sprinted up the stairs, ignoring the murmurs of the crowd below. She burst into the nursery, scooped a crying Lily into her arms and locked the heavy bedroom door behind them. She sank to the floor in the dark, rocking her daughter, whispering that everything was going to be fine. Downstairs, she could hear the party slowly breaking up, the guests leaving in uncomfortable silence. The trap was set. Richard had his video. He had his narrative. If she stayed, she would lose her child and her fortune. The tears finally came, hot and bitter. But as she cried, her mind sharpened into a cold, diamond-hard focus. She pulled Ethan's business card from her pocket. She had to act tonight. Richard had made a fatal error. He thought she was a hysterical, broken woman. He thought she would cower and sign the papers tomorrow morning. He forgot that the house, the company, and the secrets all belonged to her family first. She knew things about Richard that he didn't realize she knew. The sun rose over Lake Michigan, casting a grey, cold light into the master bedroom. Richard had slept in the guest room. When he finally emerged, he looked triumphant. He poured himself a cup of coffee and slapped a thick manila folder onto the kitchen island. He looked at Chloe, who was quietly making oatmeal for Lily. His tone was brisk and entirely devoid of emotion. He told her that his lawyers would be expecting the signed transfer documents by noon. He pulled out his phone and played the video of her screaming at the party. He said no judge in Illinois would give custody to a psychotic drunk. He gave her an ultimatum. Sign over the estate and the LLC, and she could walk away with the defective kid. Refuse, and he would take the child, put her in a state facility, and leave Chloe destitute. Chloe kept her eyes on the stove. She swallowed her rage. She nodded slowly, making her voice sound defeated and small. She agreed. She promised to sign the papers after she dropped Lily at preschool. Richard smiled, satisfied. He grabbed his briefcase and left for the downtown office. The moment the front door clicked shut, Chloe sprang into action. She had exactly 3 hours before Richard realized she wasn't coming to his lawyer's office. She ran into his study. Richard was arrogant. He believed she was too stupid to understand his business, so he never changed the combination to the hidden floor safe under the Persian rug. The code was the date he acquired his first major asset. She spun the dial. Click. The heavy metal door swung open. Inside, stacked in neat bundles, was over $200,000 in emergency cash he kept off the books. She shoved the stacks into a large leather tote bag, along with their passports, Lily's medical files, and a hard drive containing backups of all the company's true financial records. Everything she needed to prove his embezzlement and fraud. She packed one small suitcase with essentials. She left her wedding ring resting exactly in the center of the unsigned transfer documents on the kitchen island. She grabbed the keys to her SUV, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She drove erratically through the morning traffic, constantly checking her rear-view mirror. She pulled up to the Lincoln Park preschool, her hands slick with sweat. As she walked in, her phone buzzed. It was Richard. He was checking up on her, demanding a photo to prove she was actually doing the drop-off and not trying to run. Chloe felt a spike of panic. She found Lily near her cubby. She forced a bright smile, pulled her daughter close, and snapped a quick selfie with the colourful classroom background. She texted it to Richard with the message, "Just dropping her off, heading to the lawyer next." A moment later, he replied with a thumbs-up emoji. The monster was satisfied. Chloe immediately turned to the teacher, told a smooth lie about a sudden family emergency, and signed Lily out. She grabbed the girl's backpack and hurried back out to the parking lot. The cold air felt electric. She had done it. She was out. But she needed a guide through the legal minefield ahead. She pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the business card. Ethan answered on the second ring. His voice was sharp and alert. Chloe quickly explained what happened at the party, the blackmail video and the stolen cash. She told him she was at the preschool and needed to get to O'Hare Airport immediately. She was taking his advice. She was taking Lily to Dr. Harrison in Miami. Ethan did not hesitate. He told her to leave her SUV in the preschool lot so it couldn't be tracked by the GPS. He said he was 10 minutes away. When Ethan's sleek black sedan pulled up, Chloe and Lily climbed into the back seat. Ethan looked in the rear-view mirror, his eyes filled with fierce determination. He hit the gas, merging aggressively into the highway traffic heading toward the airport. Chloe was shaking, clutching the leather tote bag. She voiced her deepest fear. The video. What if Richard uses the video of her screaming to take Lily away across state lines? What if he calls the police and claims she kidnapped their daughter while intoxicated? Ethan merged into the fast lane, a sharp, brilliant smile forming on his face. Ethan told her not to worry about the video. He had a plan to neutralize it entirely. He pulled the car off the highway, stopping at a private walk-in medical clinic he frequently used for his legal clients. He told Chloe they were going inside for exactly 10 minutes to get a legally verified, time-stamped blood draw and toxicology report. Since Richard's entire blackmail scheme hinged on proving she was severely intoxicated and having an alcoholic breakdown at the party, a clean blood test taken the very next morning would prove to a judge that Richard was fabricating the narrative. It would completely destroy his credibility in family court. Chloe looked at Ethan in absolute awe. The panic began to subside, replaced by a profound sense of safety. They rushed into the clinic, got the blood drawn, and secured the certified paperwork. By the time they reached the departure terminal at O'Hare, Chloe felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude. She hugged Ethan tightly, tears in her eyes. He held her close, promising he would handle the divorce papers and the fraud charges against Richard. He told her to go save her daughter. 6 months later, the sun beat down on the pristine, white sands of Miami Beach. The air smelled of salt and coconut oil. Chloe sat on a beach chair, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, watching the turquoise waves crash against the shore. She was a completely different woman. The shadows under her eyes were gone. Her posture was straight, her spirit unbroken. Down by the water, Lily was running. She wasn't walking carefully. She wasn't limping. Thanks to Dr. Harrison's brilliant surgical intervention and months of dedicated physical therapy, Lily was sprinting through the shallow water, kicking up waves, laughing freely. The congenital defect was entirely corrected. Back in Chicago, Ethan had systematically dismantled Richard's life. Armed with the clean tox screen and the hard drive of financial records Chloe had stolen, Ethan proved Richard was embezzling from the LLC. The divorce was finalized in Chloe's favor. Richard lost his corporate job, lost access to her wealth, and narrowly avoided federal prison. Tiffany, realizing the money was gone, had abandoned him within a week. The nightmare was officially over. Chloe smiled as Lily collected seashells, her heart overflowing with a peace she had never known. The sound of footsteps crunching in the sand behind her made her turn around. Standing there, silhouetted against the bright Florida sun, was Ethan. Beside him was his son Mason, who immediately took off running toward the water to join Lily. Chloe gasped, leaping out of her chair. Ethan caught her in his arms, spinning her around in the warm breeze. He laughed, setting her down gently. He told her the final paperwork was signed. The Chicago house was sold, the company was secured under a new trust, and she was entirely free. He looked deeply into her eyes, his hands resting on her waist. His voice grew quiet, vibrating with emotion. He confessed that he had flown down not just to deliver the news, but because he couldn't spend another day away from her. He told her he loved her. Here, under the endless blue sky with her daughter healthy and her future reclaimed, Chloe pulled him in for a kiss. The darkness was finally behind them, and a beautiful new life was just beginning. Have you ever had to walk away from everything to save yourself? Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below, sharing your story of overcoming betrayal. The long, agonizing battle was finally won. Chloe did not just survive her husband's treacherous plot. She outsmarted him, protected her daughter's future, and found an unexpected, genuine love in the process. Richard was left to rot in the ruins of his own greed, while Chloe and Lily built a vibrant, beautiful new life by the ocean, surrounded by people who truly valued them. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic situation to protect the ones you love? How did you find the strength to start over? Please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories of resilience, and leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts on Chloe's escape.